Hello sewing friends, if you want to see another episode of The Sewing Bee Made Me Do It, then this is the episode for you. I fell down a much bigger hole than I expected, ended up toiling, pattern adjusting and breaking one of my cardinal sewing rules, then stick around. Well everybody, this episode is inspired by season 10 episode 3 where they were asked to upcycle a tablecloth into a blouse, and because it was the pattern challenge they all had the same pattern. It's not like last episode I did where it was just a casual day dress of choice. So of course the second I saw what was happening in that episode I knew I had a lot of tablecloths. So the first step is it prompted me to go and revisit the tablecloths that I own. And interestingly, I have one in a similar design style to one of the ones that was used in the episode. And it was nice to get out my collection. Do I call it a collection? My stash, my little pile of tablecloths, and have a look what I've got. And sometimes that's the thing I like about programs like Sewing Bee or challenges. It gives me a chance to revisit things that I've sort of built up over time. So I had a good look at what I owned and I thought, actually, do you know what? It'd be really nice to turn one of these into this blouse. And some of these tablecloths I picked up in charity shops. Others have minor sentimental connection. That one was my nan's, but it's got a few stains and things on it. So then I began to realise that I would like to try and find the pattern if possible. And what I realised a while ago was that each book that comes out, the patterns are available from the publisher online. I bought one of the previous books in a charity shop and didn't realise until I'd got it, and was a bit sad I hadn't got the patterns, that actually I can get them and print them off from online. So off I trotted to find this season's patterns, and lo and behold, I found it. Now, if I was being super organised, I could have sent the AO, because they have AO as well, off to be printed. But of course, in my eager beaver style, I didn't. So I broke my rule of not sticking together PDFs, especially for all of you. So I printed it out. Annoyingly, I did not check before I printed all 26 pages that the scaling was correct. So when I measured that afterwards, I did realise that I'd probably need to size up 1 or 2 sizes. So I did do a bit of measuring before I decided what size to cut out. So I did cut out a 14, but probably correctly I would have been a 10 or a 12 if I hadn't had printing issues. Please excuse me, I've got an awful ulcer on my tongue which is affecting my speech and my saliva. Sorry, a bit too much information. So the pattern consists of the 2 front yoke pieces which you cut out, a back yoke, the front piece which doesn't clearly tell you that I actually need to cut this for the back. So if you look at this piece here, it says lower bodice cut 1 on fold. You need 2 of these on the fold. You need 1 for the front and 1 for the back. That took a little bit of head scratching from me, but I realised they were identical pieces. I checked again the AO pieces. This is the front and back piece, so ignore what it says on there. Sleeve and sleeve cuff. Now, I, in my usual lazy style, did not stick the last piece in because I knew what would happen there. So once you've got all the pieces, I thought, it's quite interesting where the line is for the front yoke, where it comes to. So I decided to make a toile, and that's what I have on right now. So you can see the line is here. The sleeve joins right down here, and then you can see the back yoke, which is quite a deep back yoke as well, and I did as correctly instructed, which was to put the binding right on the inside so you can't see it on the front. I looked at various versions. I went back and watched the whole episode again. For some people that join there crossed over. For people like myself on this version, it didn't. So I made the toile. I realised that for me, if I wasn't going to tuck this in, this would be fine, but I am a tucky in top person, not a big over the top flowy person. So whilst this shape is nice, it's not really a shape for me. So if we have a look here, I ended up folding that out. That is not a shape for me. I feel like an untucked top, and I can see why the design was an untucked top, because it's meant to be a cool summer floaty top. It's not really for me. I quite liked this, but I was mindful of where this line cuts on me. So once I'd made my trial, thought about my adjustments, I went off and had a really good think about which of my tablecloths were the right one, because I didn't want one that was too stiff. I think I am with either this beauty, which has this edging which I would want to use, or this one and this one, somehow possibly combined together or used with something else. Are quite different fabrics actually, but I don't think this one's got enough on its own. Or of course this gorgeous one here, which I was looking, has these big expanses of white and then this lovely pattern, and you really want to think how to position that. I want it for the pattern, you need that sort of drapiness, and began cutting. There was a point during the cutting where I realised I was not going to have enough of one fabric, of one tablecloth. So then I had to really get out the other tablecloths and work out very carefully which one would go. So I'll show you what I mean. And this was the issue that one of the contestants had. So I actually went with this tablecloth here, which was my nan's. It's from Australia, and I remember it being on her table. So if you look, one of the other tablecloths I liked, they just don't work together, they jar. Same as that one, it's very jarring because this is quite washed out and lovely linen-y, and that was too bright. Of course, these guys were just too thick. So I did end up finding a suitable one, which I'll show you in a minute, but I'll talk about what then has ended up happening since then. So when I cut out the front yoke, I carefully placed it to get the birds from the tablecloth on the two front yoke pieces. And that's something I know that Esme talked to and Patrick talked about in the episode, was how you place everything. And actually the ones that were more successful had the well placed pattern in the right place. I'm not always identical, but maybe asymmetrical. Now I probably would irritate Esme with my lines there. Can you see them? I went on the sleeve for a big image, but I was very mindful that I wanted on the back yoke to have a good chunk of picture. There we go. I did try to get the Adelaide on the back yoke, but unfortunately couldn't, because it would have used right slap bang in the middle of the tablecloth. But that's where my auntie said, but I'm pleased I got that onto the sleeve there. And then on the other sleeve got some nice pictures as well. In an ideal world, I'd have liked these sleeve images, not these, yes, up the other way, but because of constraints I couldn't, and I've just realised that's got Woolworths in the picture there, which we used to have in the UK as well. How nostalgic is that? So I'll get changed and show you which other fabric I went for, and you can tell me what you think. So I went for a striped tablecloth that was equally as faded on the bottom. I actually used the bottom of the tablecloth for the ends and on the cuff. So I think, although I would take the stripes this way rather than the other way, I think it really draws attention to where that line is. And I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing or an indifferent thing at the moment, but I'll just stand up so you can see how it looks. I already think if I cut it to there, it would be a nice cropped thing, or tuck it in. Either's better. I think that red on the bottom is the worst bit. Now you can see there. So you can see just how deep down that sleeve comes. I really like this bit here though. So having made it, I think it's quite an interesting pattern. It does have a risk of making a person look like they've got super rounded shoulders, because obviously the drop sleeve is full on down here, and as I say, the sleeve is very deep as well. But I enjoyed making it. I enjoyed exploring my tablecloths. I also enjoyed the creative pursuit, and I think even in the summer, if this was like a summer sort of relaxing bed top, I quite like it. I have wondered about the sleeve being slightly shorter, but I then trotted off to eBay and I have found another Australian tablecloth, which means I might change out the bottom half for that. So I'll just show you again how I took in the sides on this one. That's a much better shape for me. There was just too much otherwise with the width going on as well. So I might take the bottom off and then make a matching top to go with this bottom half. Tips for you is this is very doable, this turning under here. This time I managed to make it cross over, but watch your pattern pieces because I actually slightly made this pattern piece a little bit wider to be able to do that on the top. Think about whether you want that width there, and also I did taper my sleeve in slightly and then there was still plenty of gathering, so you can see there mine tapers in a bit, and that was intentional because I was short on fabric, but I still think that's enough billow and things going on. There are quite a few people who've talked about other options for tablecloth blouse patterns. So if you head over to So Let's Sparkle with Sam, I'll link it below. She's done her synopsis of episode 3. And if you go to her Facebook group as well, she's been sharing inspiration. The Fold line have shared inspiration as well and have So Confident. So I'll link those below because you might decide that you don't want to use this free pattern. You might already have a pattern. I did have an hour about making the patina blouse but with the collar off. I did think about making another Romy Lantern sleeve, but I just felt that whole vast expanse of one piece, it was nice to have some way to break this up. So there are lots of options, but I thought I would go full sewing bee this time and actually make the one, and as I say, made a toile as well. When it's like this and you can't see the stripy bit, I actually quite like it. So I'll keep you updated once the other tablecloth arrives. This was meant to be using things I had. This is typical, isn't it, sewing bee, what you've done. And I'm sure lots of you are out there now searching for tablecloths. My advice to you, with someone who has a nice little collection, is you've got to keep going back to charity shops. You just got to keep popping back, because they do exist, but you just don't know when they'll be there. Or build a relationship with your local charity shop where they might, if you're lucky, they might save it for you. Boot fairs are good, eBay's good, Vinted is good as well. Asking family, again, it's back to what I said before, ask family, because somebody somewhere will have a tablecloth kicking around somewhere that they don't use anymore. And don't be put off if it has a stain on it, because you can just place the pieces in such a way that you avoid the stain. Well, I do hope you have enjoyed my little second version of the Sewing Bee Made Me Do It. Last time I know I suggested other patterns, but this time I'm recommending other people who can suggest patterns for you because other people have done the work. So I thought this time I'd just share with you the making of it. I think the time they were given was a fair amount of time for what it was, because it's not a huge amount of pieces. If you've made something like this before, I made this without the instructions. So I think that even with instructions, it's a fairly doable thing for someone who's sewn a bit. If you're a newbie, then yeah, it would take longer because you might not have done a sleeve cuff before or gathering, or you might not have done this before. So obviously someone who's not done those things before, it will take longer. But if you've done these things before, two of those things actually, all three of those things are on the Romy Lantern sleeve pattern, a sleeve cuff, gathering, and this neckline like this. So thank goodness I've made that, because it was just using all those skills again. If you'd like to see what else I got up to being inspired by the Sewing Bee, I will put a picture up here of my previous make that was inspired by episode 1. And I will catch you again soon. Bye.